The story of the Hindu valleys, the rise of the Aryans, and the enduring caste system is a tale of conquest and societal evolution. It is a story that begins thousands of years ago in one of the cradles of civilization, and that is none other than the Indus Valley. And this event in history continues to cast its shadow over modern-day India. Let us journey through this narrative, exploring how the Aryans asserted their dominance, to cultural and societal changes they brought, and how their belief in superiority still lingers in various forms today. Around 3300 BC, in the fertile plains of the Indus River and its tributaries, a remarkable civilization emerged, known as the Indus Valley Civilization. This society represented one of the world's earliest urban cultures. The cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were masterpieces of urban planning, complete with well-organized streets, advanced drainage systems, and standardized measures for trade. The inhabitants of this civilization were skilled in agriculture, pottery, and metallurgy, and their trade routes extended far beyond their borders. The Indus Valley people were peaceful and industrious, living in harmony with nature. Artifacts suggest that they worshipped natural forces, revered fertility symbols, and engaged in spiritual practices that may have influenced later Hindu traditions. Despite their advancements, the Indus people left behind no deciphered written records, leaving much of their culture shrouded in mystery. However, their legacy would face destruction with the arrival of a new group of people called the Aryans. Sometime around 1500 BC, the Indian subcontinent experienced a significant influx of people from the steppes of Central Asia. These were the Indo-Aryans, nomadic pastoralists who brought with them their language, religion, and social structures. This migration or invasion, as some scholars argue, marked the beginning of a profound transformation in the region's culture and society. The Aryans, speaking an early form of Sanskrit, considered themselves superior to the indigenous populations they encountered. These indigenous groups, often associated with the darker-skinned Dravidian people of the Indus Valley, were referred to in Aryan texts as Dasis or Dacius, terms that conveyed contempt. The Aryans viewed themselves as the bearers of civilization, dismissing the achievements of the Indus people and imposing their own cultural norms. The conflict between the Aryans and the indigenous populations was not merely physical, but ideological. The Aryans brought with them the Vedas, a collection of hymns and rituals that formed the foundation of early Hinduism. These texts emphasized the importance of sacrifices to appease the gods, and their religious practices gradually replaced the spiritual traditions of the Indus people. The Aryans' arrival in the subcontinent set the stage for a significant cultural clash. The darker-skinned Dravidian populations of the Indus Valley had built a sophisticated, settled society that emphasized trade, spirituality, and urban development. In contrast, the Aryans were a semi-nomadic, warlike people whose culture revolved around cattle rearing, conquest, and rigid social hierarchies. Initially, there was likely a prolonged period of conflict as the Aryans sought to establish dominance over the fertile lands of the Indus Valley. Archaeological evidence suggests that several cities of the Indus Valley Civilization were abandoned or destroyed around this time. While some historians argue that natural disasters or climate change contributed to the civilization's decline, the arrival of the Aryans likely accelerated this process. Over time, the Aryans began to assimilate aspects of the indigenous culture while imposing their own practices. The language of the Aryans, Sanskrit, became dominant, while the Dravidian languages were pushed to the southern regions of the subcontinent. Similarly, Aryan religious practices, codified in the Vedas, supplanted the spiritual traditions of the Indus people. One of the most enduring legacies of the Aryan presence in India is the Varna system, a hierarchical classification of society based on occupation and duties. According to the Rig Veda, society was divided into four main Varnas: Brahmins, the priests and scholars who were tasked with preserving and interpreting sacred knowledge; Kshatriyas, the warriors and rulers responsible for protecting and governing society; Vaishyas, the merchants and agriculturists who sustained the economy through trade and farming; Shudras, the laborers and service providers who supported the upper classes. Those who fell outside this classification, often the original inhabitants of the subcontinent, were labeled as untouchables or Dalits. They were considered impure and relegated to the most menial and degrading tasks, such as cleaning waste and handling dead bodies. This exclusion was justified through religious doctrine, with the Rig Veda describing the caste system as divinely ordained. The concept of Purusha, the cosmic being, placed each Varna in its hierarchical position. The Brahmins came from his head, the Kshatriyas from his arms, the Vaishyas from his thighs, and the Shudras from his feet. The Aryans' belief in their superiority was not just a product of conquest but was deeply ingrained in their worldview. They associated themselves with qualities of purity, light, and civilization, while portraying the indigenous populations as uncivilized, dark, and impure. This dichotomy became a central theme in their texts and rituals, reinforcing their dominance over the native people. This sense of Aryan superiority was not limited to ancient times. It has left an indelible mark on Indian society, manifesting in various forms of discrimination and prejudice. The caste system, initially based on occupation, became rigid over centuries, with one's Varna determined by birth rather than merit or ability. Inter-caste mobility was virtually eliminated, and the system became a tool for social control and oppression. In modern India, the caste system remains a pervasive force, despite being officially abolished by the Indian Constitution in 1950. Discrimination based on caste continues to affect millions, particularly in rural areas where traditional norms are deeply entrenched. Dalits, or scheduled castes, still face violence, exclusion, and limited access to education and economic opportunities. Affirmative action policies, such as the reservation system, have sought to address these inequalities, but progress has been slow and uneven. Another enduring legacy of Aryan dominance is colorism, a prejudice based on skin tone. In Indian society, fair skin is often associated with beauty, success, and higher status, while darker skin tones are subjected to discrimination. This bias can be traced back to the Aryans' perception of themselves superior to the darker-skinned indigenous people. The Aryans equated fair skin with purity and nobility, while darker skin was linked to servitude and inferiority. This notion was deeply ingrained in their cultural and religious practices, and over centuries, it became embedded in Indian society. The idea of fair skin as desirable was perpetuated not only through social hierarchies, but also through mythology and religious texts. Gods and goddesses were often depicted with lighter skin tones, while demons and asuras were portrayed with darker complexions, reinforcing the association of fairness with virtue and darkness with vice. These depictions were not accidental, but were deliberate attempts to uphold the Aryan-dominated social order. Colorism also affects social interactions and opportunities. Studies have shown that individuals with darker skin tones often face discrimination in education, employment, and marriage prospects. Matrimonial advertisements frequently specify preference for fair-skinned brides, underscoring how deeply ingrained these prejudices are in the collective psyche. Even in professional settings, lighter-skinned individuals are sometimes perceived as more competent or capable, further perpetuating systemic inequality. The impact of colorism is not limited to personal experiences, but extends to societal structures. Dalits and other marginalized communities, often darker-skinned, continue to face oppression and exclusion. This intersection of caste and color reinforces the disadvantages faced by these groups, creating a cycle of discrimination that is difficult to break. Activists and scholars have been working to challenge these biases and promote greater acceptance of diverse skin tones. Campaigns like Dark is Beautiful aim to celebrate natural beauty and question the societal obsession with fairness. However, changing deeply ingrained attitudes requires a concerted effort across multiple fronts, including education, media representation, and legal protections. The cultural and social dynamics introduced by the Aryans continue to shape modern India in profound ways. The rigid hierarchies they established had persisted, influencing everything from marriage customs to political representation. Efforts to dismantle these hierarchies have faced resistance, underscoring the deep-rooted nature of these divisions. Meanwhile, the contributions of the indigenous populations, particularly the Dravidians, are being re-examined and celebrated. Scholars and activists are working to highlight the rich cultural heritage of the Indus Valley Civilization and challenge the narratives of Aryan superiority that have dominated for centuries. The story of the Hindu valleys and the Aryan influence is a reminder of how deeply history shapes the present. Thanks for tuning into the past. Don't forget to subscribe and join us next time for more stories that shaped our world. See you next time.